I didn't use any ads, no Facebook ads, no ads anywhere. I didn't post anything on social media about it. I didn't post in my groups. I didn't post on Instagram. I didn't post on Facebook on my page. I didn't do any of that. And I just sent the emails and responded to people who sent me DMs and emails. So I got a slew of emails and DMs on Facebook from people. And so I responded to those. But that was it. That was the entire launch. So there was no high pressure. There was no, what if technology fails during a webinar or anything like that? Or there was no seeing a bunch of money go out the door and saying, am I going to recoup it? No, it was just, I'm going to send these emails and it worked. And the results were pretty darn amazing. I had 62 people buy the template library during this non-launch launch. And that was compared to 51 who bought during my full launch in January.
Welcome to the Online Genius Podcast, where host and renegade-thinking beer-brewing lawyer turned online entrepreneur Bobby Klink proves that building and protecting your online genius doesn't have to be rocket science. Bobby and his expert guests break down online marketing and the legal stuff so you can stop sweating the small stuff and get back to building your amazing business. Now, here's your host, Bobby Klink.
Hey there. Welcome to episode 74 of the Online Genius Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klink, and I'm really excited for today's episode because it's all about my non-launch launch that I just finished. Now, if you're wondering what a non-launch launch is, don't worry, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to kind of go over that and explain what I mean by that. But it's another one of those episodes where I'm going to be sharing with you from the inside of my business and seeing what I'm doing, what's working, and hopefully you'll be able to take something from it. What I'll tell you is in the past, launching has always been high stress and felt high stakes to me. Now, I'm not complaining. I've talked about how I kind of enjoy the energy of launches, but there really is no doubt that there's a lot of stress involved. And also that, often I'm looking at it and feel a lot of pressure because I've got money going out the door and it needs to work, right? I mean, it's not like it's going to mean I can't pay my mortgage if it doesn't work, but it needs to work to justify my spend. Well, what I just finished was the biggest promotion I've ever done. I made the most money, made the most sales, and there was zero stress and literally zero costs associated with it. So I'm excited to share a bit about it with you. So hopefully you can take some of the lessons that I've taken from it and implement them into your business, how they'll work there. So that's the idea for today's show. That's what we're going to be talking about. But before we get there, this week's episode is brought to you by the Online Genius podcast community on Facebook. Now, I love coming to you and kind of, offering lessons and information through these podcasts and guests, like a lot of the great guests I've had recently and that are coming up in episodes to follow. But honestly, I really want to engage with you. I don't want to talk at you. I want to have a conversation with you. And the easiest and best way to do that is in the community. It's where we can kind of go back and forth. We can, address marketing issues, legal stuff, whatever you want to talk about. Heck, if you want to talk about beer, we can talk about that too. But it is the chance for us to get together and talk about how to build a business the right way for the long term and actually kind of create something that we can be proud of to serve other people. So it's absolutely free. I'd love for you to join it. You can do so by heading over to youronlinegenius.com/community. Again, youronlinegenius.com/community, and you can join. Just make sure you answer the questions because I use those as kind of a litmus test. If people don't answer them, I don't let them in. So answer the questions and I'll let you in. So with that, let's dive in. Now, first, I want to give a little bit of background here to give you an idea of what we're talking about, how we got to this non-launch launch, etc. This was a launch of my signature product, the Online Genius Template Library. It is access to all of my legal templates, access to a private Facebook group for support, and then also it would include any templates I introduce in the future will be added. Think of it as essentially you buy my templates now, you buy access to the template library, and it is your legal toolbox for now and into the future. So it's kind of buy once and you're protected. You've got peace of mind. Now, For those of you who've been with me for a while, this is the same product I launched in January. Now, January was a very traditional launch. I used a webinar and I did a debrief of that January launch and talked about what I learned and some of the lessons. You can actually check out episode 65 to hear how that launch went, what worked, what didn't. Again, one of the things that I learned that time was that getting people onto a webinar about the legal stuff was kind of tough. People didn't seem to react well. I was paying way too much for my Facebook ad costs to get people onto the webinar. Again, I made money and even got a return on ad spend on those ads, but it was quite expensive and it was kind of, going uphill. So what I had planned was to do another launch to kind of revise what I had done in January and do another full launch in April. So I was going to do a full launch in April, kind of was going to be my second quarter launch of the product. And, I had a lot of things. I was going to revise the webinar. And instead of doing a legal webinar, my thinking was to basically do a webinar about what you need to do to succeed in business and some of the shifts you need to make. It was going to be about how I've taken, or how I went from a business making no money to a $250,000 in a year. That was the idea. There were going to be tie-ins to the legal stuff where I could then pivot at the end to make the offer, but it really was going to be about something broader than the legal stuff. I thought, hey, that's something people would be more interested in. So that was the idea. That's what I had planned for my webinar, which again, I had not even started writing it. I had an idea what the three shifts I was going to talk about were, but had not actually started creating the webinar itself. I had some other things planned though. One of the things I was going to do was a testimonial contest. I was going to give people who had already signed up for the template library the ability to submit testimonials, and then I could have people vote on it. And the winner was going to get a really great prize. My plan was to give them a seat in a program that one of my friends is launching about email and creating your email sequences, etc. So that was my plan. That's like a group coaching program. So that was going to be the idea for that. I was going to add some additional wrinkles to it, like have people who had bought some of my templates but not the library could do testimonials about those, and then the winner of that was going to get a free access to the template library. So I had a lot of great stuff planned. Also, I was planning to add a new element, doing a series of Facebook Lives. Basically, every day that the cart was open, I was going to be doing a Facebook Live. And that was going to be a combination of a couple of things. Some would maybe be testimonials, but part of what I had in mind maybe was to do something like mini hot seats, like people could come on and we would work through how to customize the templates for their business on a Facebook Live. So think about it. What I would be doing would be busting one of the obstacles that or objections people have by showing them how simple this stuff really is. But at the same time, it would give incentives for people to sign up early because, hey, if they sign up on day one, they could potentially apply for a hot seat and maybe, get on with me on a Facebook Live, and it would potentially help them or give them confidence that they could get the stuff done. So I had that. That was kind of what I had planned. Now, when you listen to that, you're probably saying, whew, so you had envisioned a bigger launch, a much more involved launch than the last time around. And that's kind of true. There were going to be a lot of things that were different that I was going to have to add. So it was going to mean a lot of work. And I had actually started the runway because I was going to do something broader than just the legal stuff in the webinar. I started doing messaging that was broader. So I was doing 3 Facebook Lives a week, 2 of which had nothing to do with the legal stuff. And then the legal ones had to do with kind of busting myths, if you will, or misconceptions or things like that about the legal stuff. So that I was doing. And also, I developed a quiz that wasn't about the legal stuff. I mean, there was going to be a back end part that told people about the legal stuff they needed to get in place to protect their business. But the focus of the quiz was about how to get traction in your business, how to actually, get off the hamster wheel, if you will, and really start to make the progress you want. So I created all of that. Now, if you're interested in that quiz, by the way, it is live. You can go take it. And I think there's some great freebies on the back end. If you want to take that, head over to youronlinegenius.com/quiz. It'll take you there. It's like, I think 10 questions. It's pretty quick and easy. And there's a great freebie, but it'll also help you kind of understand where to focus your time and energy to, build the business of your dreams. It's now not something that's promoting my webinar, obviously, or promoting a launch. It's just something that's out there that people can get some value from. So if you'd like to do that, you can. So that's what was going on. But another piece of what I was doing was that I, from the January launch, had discovered that a wait list that I had set up was hugely valuable to me. It had been a big learning I had from that January launch. I made, I think, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was $162 per lead for the people on that wait list for the January launch. And I hadn't done anything to warm them up or anything. So I decided, this time around, I was going to be pushing people to the wait list to kind of build excitement, et cetera. So I was doing that during the build up period and got the wait list pretty big. Then life got in the way. What happened was, and I've talked about this, I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast so much, but I've talked about it in lives, in the group, et cetera, that I still run my law firm business. And I had a case that had settled. Now we're coming up on almost 2 years ago, but an ancillary dispute has come up and I feel an obligation to the client to help them with it, because if they had to hire someone other than me, it would cost them a lot more money to get that person up to speed on everything that had happened, et cetera. And so even though it's not the kind of matter or case that I'm really taking these days, I obviously agreed to help my client because I have a sense of loyalty to clients, customers, et cetera. And the problem, though, was that it is a case that by the agreement, it's going to go through arbitration, which is private dispute resolution, but it has a very short decision time. And that means that I was going to have to focus a lot of time, a lot of energy to the law firm. And you think about it, if I have to put a lot of time and a lot of energy into my law firm, that's going to create some difficulties of me trying to do a full launch that has a lot more going on, et cetera. So at first I was thinking, I'm going to push through, I can do it. But then I had this realization in, I don't know, I guess it would have been early to mid-March that there was no way I could do it. There's no way I could pull off a new webinar, which if you think about it, because it's a new webinar, the email sequences coming into it, going out of it, et cetera, would need to be tweaked. I probably would need to address, and change my sales page messaging somewhat to match up to the webinar. Although obviously I would still be selling the legal protection, I would need to have messaging that really was congruent throughout. So I was going to have to do that. But I also realized I couldn't pull off the testimonial contest because there was going to be a lot of work. I was going to have to set up places for people to submit, email people, build up excitement, go through them, organize, catalog, etc. You just think about it, there was going to be a lot of moving parts. So I knew that was off the table as well. So that's what I was facing, and I had to decide what to do. And at one point, I considered just pushing the entire launch back, just basically saying, I'm going to push it back a couple of months, etc. The problem is, honestly, I didn't know when I would kind of be freed up a little bit and not have a ton of work in my law firm. And so I didn't know how long the pushback would be. And, maybe I push it back 2 months and then all of a sudden I'm still in the middle of the law firm work. And so I didn't know. So that was part of it. And I just said, I'm not sure that's what I want to do. So instead, what I decided to do was a bit non-traditional. I decided to scrap the idea that I was going to do a traditional second quarter launch and focus instead on the wait list. In other words, I decided I wasn't going to do a webinar. I wasn't going to do a testimonial contest. I wasn't going to do any kind of event-based launch. I decided instead that I was going to launch to my wait list with emails. And that was the plan. And I was also thinking about, well, maybe I'll also, send a couple emails to people who've bought individual templates, but not the library. So that was what I had planned. I knew it was going to be an email only launch because that, wasn't going to be heavy lifting. A lot of those emails, I was able to either take an existing email and use it almost in whole, or take the messaging and tweak it just a little bit. So it wasn't going to be a ton of work. So it was something that I felt I could do. Now, ironically, I'm recording this in early April, And my law firm work has still remained at a simmer. Now, I've been working, but if I had known that it was going to be at this level, I probably would have pushed through and done a full launch. Candidly, I will tell you that. Now, I couldn't have known that. There's no way I could have known that. And so, it wouldn't have worked out. And because of what's happened, I'm glad I didn't know that, because I'm very happy with what happened and with what, I did instead. So let's talk about what that was specifically. I pushed up the launch a little bit because this non-launch launch, I guess, the open cart period, you could call it, because it wasn't going to be a traditional launch, et cetera. So I think I had originally planned to do my emails as part of my launch. I was going to do a brief open cart for my wait list the first week of April. I decided to make it the last week of March. So I moved it up by a week. So the cart was open March 27th to March 29th. A few people managed to get around redirects. I'm not sure how they did it, but so technically, although it was supposed to close at 9 p.m. my time on March 29th, a few people managed to get in after that. But that was basically the launch period was 3 days, and not even a full 3 days, because I started it at, say, 9 in the morning on a Wednesday, and it was supposed to close at 9 p.m. on a Friday. So, 2.5 days the cart was open. My plan before it, I had teed up 6 emails that were going to go out to my wait list. 5 of them were for everyone, 2 on Wednesday, 1 on Thursday, and 2 on Friday. But I had also teed up an additional one to go out Thursday night, so on day 2 of the launch at night, that was going to go to people who had clicked a link, basically had gone to the sales page, but had not bought. Because I've used that kind of tactic in the past, so I decided that's what I was going to do. So that was the plan. That was what I was going to do. And I was going to actually, do a couple of emails to my buyers who had bought things other than my template library. And those were going to go out, one on Thursday, one on Friday. That was the plan. Now, the plan changed a bit because on the first day the cart was open, I happened to be doing a Q&A session with Amy Porterfield in my role as an ambassador in her new program, Digital Course Academy. This was something we'd set up. It wasn't tied to the launch, had nothing to do with the launch. It was just something that we had planned. And I'm always careful not to promote my stuff on other people's turf. So I honestly didn't plan to mention it, to say anything about it during the live. But Amy being Amy and believing that my stuff was good and that it would be useful for the folks in her program, actually had me tell people about it on the Q&A. So that happened on day 1, which kind of late in the day on day 1, I guess my time. I think it was in the late afternoon. And so that happened. And basically I opened it up to folks in that community. Because of that, I decided that instead of sending 2 emails just to my potential buyers, those emails I was going to send Thursday and Friday, I should send those emails to my entire list. In other words, if I was going to make this offer open to people outside of my tribe, I should also make it available to my entire tribe. And part of the reason I wanted to do that, just so you know, is the product is normally $9.97, but for my wait list, there's a discount. So I decided that everyone who bought during this time was going to get the discount. They were going to get it at $8.47 instead of $9.97. So I said, hey, if I'm making this available to anyone who is outside of my tribe, it needs to be available to my tribe. People on my email list should always be treated at least as well, if not better, than other people. So that's why I decided to make that slight change. So that was it. And that's what I did. I didn't use any ads, no Facebook ads, no ads anywhere. I didn't post anything on social media about it. I didn't post in my groups. I didn't post on Instagram. I didn't post on Facebook on my page. I didn't do any of that. And I just sent the emails and responded to people who sent me DMs and emails. So I got a slew of emails and DMs on Facebook from people. And so I responded to those. But that was it. That was the entire launch. So there was no high pressure. There was no, what if technology fails during a webinar or anything like that? Or there was no seeing a bunch of money go out the door and saying, am I going to recoup it? No, it was just, I'm going to send these emails, and it worked. And the results were pretty darn amazing. I had 62 people buy the template library during this non-launch launch. And that was compared to 51 who bought during my full launch in January. And just for sake of comparison, my list is no bigger now. I mean, it's marginally bigger, but I think I've shed some people. I literally took people off my list after that launch, between that launch and now. So my list is about the same size, with give or take 500, but I'm around 4,000, between the 4,000 and 5,000 mark, and was during both launches. So it wasn't because I had a bigger list, but I converted more, got 62 instead of 51. Revenue, I brought in right around $59,000 in revenue on this launch, and that's compared to $53,000 in January. Now, the reason why the revenue numbers are closer than the actual number of buyers is because during the January launch, a lot of people bought at the $997 instead of the $847. So that's why, even though I had considerably fewer buyers in January, the revenue wasn't vastly different. Again, 59 versus 53. But here's the kicker. The profit this time around was $59,000 because I had zero costs. There were no ads. There was nothing. And that was compared to right around $41,000 in January. So that was a huge difference. Because I didn't have pressure, because I didn't have any of that going on, I didn't have anything that I had to account for in the launch. Depending on how you do your accounting, theoretically, I guess I should think about costs such as, like my list building costs, et cetera. But I didn't put my general list building costs into my analysis for the January launch. So, I view those as things that will always be present in my business and not attributable to an individual launch. So again, more buyers, more revenue, way more profit. That's all good. That's all something that makes you very happy. And so it's something that I think is worth considering and worth looking and worth saying, is this something that you could do in your business to actually make it work? Now, I do want to talk about why this worked because, I think if you're thinking about it, you need to think through, why was it that this worked and can you replicate it? Because you shouldn't just say, oh, well, Bobby's saying don't do a launch. I am not saying don't do a webinar. I'm not saying don't do a challenge if that's what you do. I'm not saying don't do a video series if that's how you launch. I simply wanted to share with you these results. And I think there are reasons why this worked for me that you can implement. And maybe there are things that you implement that simply make a launch lower stress if you want to keep doing launches, or maybe you want to try this once at some point and you can give it a try. What I do want to say though, is you should not do this. You should not say, I'm going to do a non-launch launch because you're afraid or because you're playing small or because of something like that. That's why a lot of people try to do these things. I see that a lot. People say, well, I'm just going to send some emails. And it's because honestly, they're playing small. They're nervous, they're afraid, etc. That's not a reason to do this. That is not, something that you should be doing. And I don't want you to take that as what I'm suggesting to you here, because it's not. Playing small is never a good answer. This is something that worked because of some other things that I had done right. Now, the first reason this worked is because I had created pent-up demand. When you have a tribe that follows you and you talk about your signature product and you drop references to it, on social media, in your emails, in all of that stuff, that will start to create demand because people start hearing about it and knowing about it. And so you're not then having to try to, educate them that this product is out there during a launch. They already kind of know about it. So there are people sitting there saying, hey, I'm ready. Just I want to buy. That's what you want to get to. So if you start doing this right, you'll, get this to happen. Now, I have been trying to work on this, but there are some, the big name entrepreneurs are really good at this. They just kind of drop things in every day when they talk. In their podcasts that aren't about their product specifically, they'll say things like, well, my students in blah know about this because, and they just kind of throw that in there. And so the idea is you're constantly seeding the idea. You have people knowing about the product, hearing about the product, understanding what the product is, and understanding its value, right? So that's an important thing. And let me give you a little hint. This podcast is doing that. If you're listening to this podcast and you haven't bought the template library, you heard me talk about what it is. It's all my templates, it's support, etc. So you heard about it. Now you know about it. So, maybe then in the next launch, you hear about it and you automatically know what I'm talking about, what I'm launching. And, it may be that you say, hey, I want it, boom, done. And then I don't have to do a lot of heavy lifting. But so you need to think about doing that, about how can you drop references on a regular basis in your content, on social media, etc. That's not promotional. You're not actively promoting it. You're simply talking about it, and talking about it in the context of a way that is useful to your crowd, to your tribe, etc., so that it doesn't feel promotional or salesy, because that's not what it is, but it has that added benefit. So that was part of it. And again, I did that also by actively promoting my wait list, right? I was promoting the wait list the entire time. And then when I decided that I wasn't going to do a full launch, I got into active promotion mode of promoting the wait list via emails. I dropped, my PS lines in various emails that I sent out about the podcast, had it. But I also talked about it in social media, in my group, et cetera. So I was promoting it and getting people onto the wait list. So that was a big part of kind of how I created the demand before opening the door. The idea is, if you have demand, if people know about your product, know it's coming, and are waiting at the door when you open, that is huge. I mean, think about it kind of like, Black Friday, the old Black Friday days where people would be like in line outside Best Buy, we don't want to have people trampled. And luckily that doesn't happen in the online space. But think about that. If you do it right, if you do this process right of creating demand, of doing your pre-launch runway right, you will have that kind of virtual rush when you open the door. You'll have a bunch of people who are ready to go, and so they will buy. Now, just because you have a rush, just so you know, that doesn't mean they'll all come and buy on day one, but it means they know about it. They're listening for the launch. If you have bonuses, et cetera, it might make them buy on day one, but ultimately they're primed for it. They're looking for it, and they will buy. So that's part of it, because I had created that pent up demand. Now, also part of it is that I have created a connection with my audience by doing the things that I have been talking about and teaching you over the last, 20 or so episodes. It's by by creating regular content, by creating this podcast and providing valuable content to people every single week and showing up. And literally I've had a valuable piece of content come out every week, every Tuesday, without fail, since I think it's December 5th of 2017 is when this podcast dropped. That consistency is part of it. It creates a, sense of engagement, and you start to build know, like, and trust factor. So you've got to be creating regular content, because that is part of the key here. But it's also that I send emails on the regular to my list. Now, I have to admit, I was pretty good about this last year, but I wasn't perfect during last summer. But since last August, there has not been a week go by without me sending an email to my list. Now, 1 week this year in the middle of my January launch, I didn't send my podcast email. That was an intentional decision because I'd been hitting my list hard. But I sent, they'd seen an email from me, and then the next week they got 2 podcast emails from me. So the point is, I've sent an email every single week for going on, 9 months now. And even before that, I was sending them pretty regularly. But it's also what those emails are, right? Those emails are not boring, things. They are authentic. They are things that people want to read. People open my emails. I get, responses pretty much every week from people saying they loved my email. So doing that and building that and really building rapport, finding your style, finding your personal, authentic voice is important. So you really need to do that. And that will be huge as well. Now, the other piece is I have regular social media interactions. My Facebook group, I'm in there, and it's strange. I mean, I am often feeling like, oh, I wish there was more engagement. But then, I look at the engagement rate and it's a way above average, quite honestly. The numbers of people engaging in my free group are way above what you would see as an industry average percentage. I'm candidly at percentage engagements of the number of people who engage as a percentage of people there. That is almost as high as one of the people who was teaching a lesson at Social Media Marketing World a couple of weeks about how to create an engaged Facebook group. So, that gives you some sense that I'm doing that. I'm interacting with people, but I also interact with my tribes other places. You've heard me talk about, my Facebook strategy, et cetera, of being present in not just my group, but other people's groups and really interacting with and building this kind of sense that people know, like, and trust me through the social media interactions as well. So, it's basically all of that, doing the content, creating content, sending emails, being on social media and engaging with people and actually being genuine about it. Candidly, when people send me an email, I respond. If someone on my list sends me an email, I respond. And so that creates this sense of, kind of a personal connection, which that is part of what does it. So, I'll tell you also that it's partly because I've done that. And that's about viewing this as a long game, right? Not as I'm going to get people into a launch now and sell to them this time or I'm done. I know a lot of the people who actually signed up during this non-launch launch are people that I have known for a year. And by known, I was in other groups with them. I've been a presence with them. They've been on my list for close to a year. And they just bought for the first time. So that happens, but that kind of commitment, that kind of long game only happens if you're willing to put in the time, right? If you view your list as only good for promotions and you only talk to them during promotion periods, you're not going to have that, right? But because I have built this, system where I'm consistently creating content, sending emails and interacting with them, people who I've been interacting with for a year, now all of a sudden they're not just warm, they're hot, right? So the minute they have a need, they're going to buy. And some of them probably bought even though they don't even yet need it. They're not 100% sure they need all of it, but they said, I'm going to buy this time. And so that's part of it. So, that's another thing. If you want to have success at this, you're going to have to get in the practice of doing that. Now, another thing I want to talk about is that I have worked on my copy. This is kind of the third big key to this. You're not going to succeed in a non-launch launch unless you have really dialed in your copy. And the reason I say that is because I didn't have a chance with a webinar or with social media or with lies or anything like that during the actual launch period. So that meant my copy had to do the work. Now, some of this I've been working on my copy generally, so people enjoy my emails. So I have a good number of folks who tell me that literally they look forward to my weekly emails because they feel amused, they feel like they get something, etc. Well, if you think about it, that means those folks are going to be much more likely to convert because they're going to open my emails and read them because they expect to get value. So you need to work on your email copy generally and get to the point that people enjoy reading your copy. But more importantly, and just as important here, is that I've been honing the messaging for this exact product since October. And even before that, I had been working on a similar, kind of a slightly different product, but with a lot of the same pain points, et cetera, since last May. And that means I've got a full year of really kind of trying to hone messaging generally. And since October, I guess that's about 7 or 8 months now that I've really been honing the particular messaging, meaning the emails that I had available to me for this launch. I was able to go back to emails that I started, writing in October, had drafted, have iterated, have improved since then, and look at those and say, okay, let me pull this. And some of them I was able to pull basically without having to make many changes other than dates and things like that. But because the messaging still stands, because I built it, tweaked it, iterated it. Other times it was, hey, I take this piece, this messaging concept, this idea from these prior emails, and I can just drop it into here. But the point is that I know what emails to use. I've got them available, but also I have kind of an idea of call it a story arc, if you will, right? But it's the points that I want to take people through in these emails kind of follow a pattern because I've been honing this messaging. I know what people are going to say, what they're going to think, etc. I know the biggest objections, so I hit them as much as I can. It may not succeed, but I at least know how to send that message and how to put the message right. So that is equally important as well. So those are the things that I proactively did, without a doubt, that were important and that are key. And that if you wanted to try a no launch, you're going to have those pieces really dialed in as well. But I got to talk about a couple other things. Look, the shout out from, Amy Porterfield and doing that Q&A definitely helped. Now, I want to be clear though, that the launch would have been a success even without that. I mean, I can track sales of people who were on my wait list, et cetera. And so it would have been a success, but I can't deny that that was fuel. And I made sales because of that. I made sales to people who were not on my list yet because of that. It might be that I made sales to people who were on my list because that was kind of another messaging point where they heard it. It was definitely important. But one thing I do want to point out is that happened because of the strategies that I've been teaching you. Right? Back in episode 66, I talked about my Facebook strategy of going into other people's groups and becoming an authority there and building your authority. That strategy is the reason I went from unknown to an ambassador in her program. So it is the same concepts I've been teaching you. And it's a lot like what I was talking about a second ago about, kind of creating this engagement. It's about connecting with your ideal customer where they are and just providing a ton of value. Because that's what I do. I provide a ton of value in these other groups, and therefore people end up knowing, liking, and trusting me more than they would have otherwise. And so as a result, doing that, taking that long view and really kind of coming at it that way is part of why I have the following, the engagement, et cetera. And so you should think about implementing that as well. And when you start doing that, maybe you don't get a shout out from a particular person, but it will start to build, snowball, et cetera. So I just wanted to put that caveat there. Now, the last word of caution I want to give is this isn't about thinking small. At the beginning of talking about, why it worked, I said it can't be about you thinking small. But another thing I want to say, a word of caution, this may partly be because of the nature of my product. And what I mean by that is I'm not selling a course, a membership, information, something like that. And James Wedmart, who I'm in his inner circle, and when I presented kind of the results from my January launch, that was one of the things he said. He said he wasn't even sure I really needed to do a formal launch. And his point was, if you're selling an online course, people don't go say, hey, I want to take an online course. They say, hey, I want to solve this problem, right? And so if you're selling an online course, the notion is that you may need to do some teaching to show people that they should follow your teaching, right? In other words, you have to kind of give them a sample of what they'll be getting so that they feel confident to buy from you. So could be true, right? I mean, it could definitely be the case that part of the nature of this is because what I'm selling are legal templates, not something else. I don't really have to teach. Quite honestly, people don't want me to teach is kind of one of the lessons I got from January. People don't want to go to a webinar to learn about legal stuff. They just want me to solve the problem. And that's what the templates do. Now, I'm not sure though that that's absolutely right. Now, I can't talk about who, but I know people who have done launches of courses who have done things similar to me in the sense that they have pent up demand. They have been consistent in content. They have built this real engagement with their community. They have, this following, know, like, and trust because they've done all of everything else right. And they might do webinars, but they have people beating down the doors when they open for a launch who are going to buy no matter what. Now, those people will often go to the webinars because the webinar is something they want to learn or because they want to spend more time, with the person. But honestly, they were going to buy no matter what. So for someone like that, I think that kind of proves out the notion that if you do things right, if you create the content, if you build the connection with your tribe, then you actually can do something similar to what I did. Now, you might want to do a webinar still. I think webinars are often valuable if it's something that your community would get a bunch of value from. But if you implement the other parts of this non-launch launch that I've talked about, it can be no stress, or at least very low stress. So I just wanted to stress that. So that's kind of why I think it worked. So the last thing I want to talk about basically is, where do I go from here? In other words, if my non-launch launch did better than my last launch, am I going to do launches anymore? And I can honestly tell you, sitting here today, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do the next time I open the cart, which I anticipate will be in July. I'm not sure if I'll do something that looks like a launch. What I'll tell you is I'm not going to do just this non-launch launch that I did with just emails. There will be lead up. Some of the things I was thinking about doing as part of my launch the last time, I will do, including like a testimonial contest I will likely implement for the July launch. And I will most likely do some kind of events during the launch week and do social media, etc. But beyond that, I don't know. I don't know if I will do a webinar. I don't know if I'll do a challenge. I don't know if I'll do a video sequence. I think, candidly, I'm going to do something non-traditional, something different than what other people are doing, because I, had success with it, and I'm open to trying other things. But the one thing I do know is that the key to success, and the key to me having a successful launch in July, whether it's a traditional one or a non-traditional one, isn't about what I do in July. It's about what I do in April, in May, and June. It's about building my list. It's about growing my list. It's about engaging with the people on my list. It's about building the following. It's about building up the pent up demand. So I'm going to be doing that. And, I think one thing I have figured out is, quite honestly, my ad budget is not going to go to launch time. I may put some small amount of ad budget for retargeting during launches, but I think my ad budget is going to be spent on building my list between launches, because that's where I think I'm going to get more bang for my buck, because that's where I've had success up to this point. So that's what I have planned. That's what I'm thinking going forward. Beyond that, I don't quite know. But stay tuned. By the way, if listening to this makes you say, darn it, I wish I would have gotten the template library this time around. Hey, how about you do the next best thing and join my wait list? See, I'm teaching you there. I'm going to go ahead and keep talking about that. You can always join that by going to youronlinegenius.com/library. When I'm not in kind of cart open, that goes to a redirect where you can join my wait list. So you can go ahead and do that if you're interested. And if nothing else, maybe you can see what I do and maybe you'll kind of funnel hack me a little bit. So if nothing else, it's got some value there. But that's it. That's a recap of my non-launch launch that I just finished, my least stressful ever promotion period that had great results. So hope you've learned something. What I've learned is I'm going to keep doing more of what I was doing, which is really trying to connect with people. And I really would like to connect with you. If you're not yet a member of the community on Facebook, I would love for you to join there so we can interact. We can, hang out. You can, enjoy my, my gift game and the sometimes interesting comments I make, but also we can, talk about, what are you struggling with and figure out how I might be able to help you. So you can do that by heading to youronlinegenius.com/community. Again, youronlinegenius.com/community. And, you can join absolutely free. Just answer the questions and we'll be able to connect and talk. And, we can really engage with each other. So that's it. And I'll see you back here next week for episode 75 of the Online Genius Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Online Genius Podcast. Make sure to tune in next week for more great tips, tricks, and strategies to help you build and protect your online genius.